What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Hope everybody's well. Hope you guys got some good stuff going on. Shout out to the brothers that came through already. Jay Cleveland, what's good? Raheem, what's happening? Mark, what's going on? Yusef, Brother Spain Man, Kiel, you know what I mean? Brothers who come through early. I very much appreciate it. Clutch and Stick, what's happening? I know, Steven. You caught it. That's right. Child of Light, what's going on? Rebel, what's going on? Hey, Rue, Donnie, what's up? Man, it's been a crazy one. I haven't been doing too many shows lately, balancing home and work responsibilities. Y'all know how I go. Everybody doing it. Shout out to Dardar. Appreciate that support. JS, what's up? But especially in light of Dardar's suggestion, like, share, subscribe, join, and donate if you will. Support the channel so we can continue to bring you independent black male thought and push the boundaries of what we need to consider, things we need to reflect on, regardless of whether or not people like it, regardless of whether or not it makes people feel good. We got to get to the real of what it is we're experiencing and what needs to be talked about. Now, before I delve in, I do have to share some good news. Last week, my son and I think I mentioned it, even though I haven't done too many shows, we applied to about 12 different colleges for him. Senior in high school, starts next year in college. And within a week, he got accepted to 2 universities, which I didn't know happened. I'm old school. Like when I was applying, you applied with paper. You know what I mean? And you waited till March until you found out anything, But because everything's online, it's smoother, it's quicker. He already got notified about 2 universities, so I'm crazy proud of him already. They're not necessarily, our first picks, but that's not the point. The point is, there's a moment as a father where it becomes real to you. My son is going to be gone next year. You know what I mean? So that means, like, if he gets denied 10 times after this, he's going to one of the 2 that he already got offers from. So it's hitting me like, yo, this shit is real. Like, and it ain't help that it's Halloween, because the way Facebook be hitting you, they hit you with the old pictures. So I'm looking at Halloweens from when he was 7, 9, 12. Oh my God, even 5. I mean, Jesus, there's some Halloweens in there, man, where we were working on a real low budget, but I made sure he had, better costumes than I did. Man, that kid had some fun, man. But it's just amazing to me, see him go from 5 to 17. So, the parents out there feel me, or if you have family members or friends that, have babies that you have a place in their life, you know what I'm talking about. The shit goes fast. So that said, I just wanted to share that little piece, that stuff is getting real, man. He's getting older. It's about that time. So this time next year, your boy will be officially empty nester, I have to discover that. I've been talking to people who've gone through it. So I got to go through this whole transformation, right? Like, I don't even remember shit I used to like to do. I don't think I ever lived alone. I think I went from the college roommate stage to moving my fiance and sharing an apartment. So I've been taking care of somebody for about 24, 25 years. Yeah. So this will be the first time where I actually just live alone. So this is going to be real interesting. Shout out to Steven. Appreciate the support, to support our intelligentsia, especially when they're essentially equipping us with what could rightly be considered online intellectual self-defense classes. I love it. I love it. Appreciate that support, Steven. That's what's up. Spain Man says, my son is 8 and I already get sentimental looking at his younger pics. I just try to savor the moment. Real talk. That's what I'm talking about, man. He texted me and I sat there for like 15 minutes, froze, man. And I went in there and gave him a hug, told him I was proud of him. He didn't even know why. He was like, what? What? I said, don't worry about it, kid. Yeah. So anyway, that said, Let me see. What's up, Artisan? See Artisan in the house. Um, I had to share that pic of yours of the next of the Black Panther Wakanda thing and set people off on Facebook, man. I had to banish people and it got crazy, man. Got crazy. So I appreciate you posting that. Y'all check out Artisan's community tab here on YouTube, see what I'm talking about. I think he posted, I think he posted a short. If you can check that from his channel, Artisan MC. Yeah, man, they got bucked. I had to block a couple people behind that one. Anyway, so that's what's up, But real quick before I jump in, the last thing I want to show, and I don't think I'm going to play any music with this, mainly because Facebook be tripping. But I thought I'd share this little piece with you while I talk it through. I don't know if y'all, but Black male teachers. I'm saying whether or not they get love, I just wanted to shout this brother out for some good work. You know what I mean? Inspiring the kids, working with them, getting down on their level. Same new. Guess it would help if I share it with y'all. So let me try that again. With this, hold on. There we go. Yes, and of course the music does not play. So for whatever reason, it played on one end, and when I put it up here, it didn't. That's all right. I didn't think it would. It's been tripping lately whenever I've tried to share it, but I wanted to shout out this black male teacher doing his thing. You know what I'm saying? Supporting kids, getting on their level, like I said, and doing the day-to-day work. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. And this is not new. Black men have been doing this for the longest. They just haven't been given credit for it. So shout out to him. I just saw this on the Power Place. I don't know if that has anything to do with him, but I just wanted to give him props for that. Real talk. So, black men putting in that work definitely need to be supported. Shout out to Shocks 112. Congrats to Young Scholar. Appreciate that, man. Cam from TMR Radio says, congrats to the young man. My daughter is 9, and man, it's going fast. Thanks for what you do. Much appreciated, man. It is, and it goes fast. Ghetto User, appreciate that support. Says support the scholar. Yeah, man. Get your pictures in, get the videos in, save them. You know what I'm saying? It does. It goes real quick. I used to be able to hold him in one hand when I would put him to sleep every night. And now he's 6'10" with a size 20 shoe. So, hey, go figure. So anyway, let's get into the meat of tonight. So tonight we are dealing with one Miss Brittney Griner. Of course, Brittney Griner's been in all the news for a while now because of what's going on in Russia. Having been arrested for having a very small amount of what I understand to be marijuana. Shocks again says, are you going to start a send-off fund? Oh, I hadn't even thought about that, man. But I'm going to think about it. But I got to do something because next year I'll be driving him out there. Or he'll be driving himself. I'll be driving behind him. And I just get to witness that. So anyway, we got Brittney Griner. This is a Newsweek article. Covers this whole question of whether or not she'll be receiving her WNBA salary while in Russian jail. I'm going to put all the links for everything I cover tonight, in there for y'all to check out so you can peruse it. I'm not going to get into what their answer to the question is, but what I did want to highlight in this real quick was some of the information around her pay, right? As we kind of delve into some other things. And this was mainly because some of the brothers on my Facebook page made some interesting statements about how we regard this whole thing. Shout out to Stylist. What's up? Appreciate you, man. I'm following your example, man. Yeah, man. So it says Griner signed a 3-year contract extension with the Phoenix Mercury for $664,544 in 2020, which will give her $221,450 for the 2021-2022 season and $227,900 for the 2022-23 season. It said, of course, her WNBA salary looks paltry compared to the millions of dollars male basketball stars get paid. They are on this like a dog on a bone. And it's ridiculous in many respects, because on the surface level, it's easy to walk away with one opinion until you get to the reality of how much money the WNBA generates. And that is always the question. That most particularly men, and black men in particular, are not able to get away from, regardless of what you think or how you feel things should go. when you actually start to calculate dollars in relation to things, it's where it's different. It's kind of like when you see a celebrity from back in the day, or somebody you just assumed was balling, and they're driving Uber. Y'all remember the brother from the Cosby Show who played Sandra's husband, right? And a couple years ago they found out he was bagging groceries, and people were flipping out about it, but everybody imagined he was, probably some millionaire sitting up in a house, a mansion somewhere or whatever. We have these ideas about how we feel things should be versus what they actually are. The reality is, if what you do doesn't generate, then the reality of what you get is what it is, right? And so this whole constant blaming of the NBA is really quite ridiculous when you consider that the NBA actually bankrolls much of the WNBA to account for what it doesn't make. And that's why we saw recently, some of the players quite frustrated. One in particular, y'all know who he is. The name escapes me at the moment, but y'all know who he is better than I do. I don't even follow sports to any great degree, but he pointed it out. And he said, I'm really tired of people blaming, the NBA. Really low key black male players. That's a lot of it. That's a lot of it. Because really, when you start hearing more and more of these WNBA players, they tend to be black women. And there's this underlying dig at black male NBA players that, not everybody wants to say outright. Yeah, Elvin from the Cosby Show. Appreciate that. And at the end of the day, it's like, look, those brothers do bankroll. Draymond Green. Is it Draymond or Raymond? I thought it was Draymond. But anyway, I appreciate that. Thanks, fella. Yeah, he pointed out, and he was, righteously frustrated. He's like, we do bankroll y'all. It is what it is. And this constant shitting in men's face over the support they actually do extend institutionally as well. And then you get this whole little other thing where they show up to games to try and, it bring some attention to the games, and they can't even be shown on camera, right? Because we can't take the focus from the girls or from the women, but that's why they're there, to actually highlight the game so people might generate more interest. But this kind of gender, attack in the NBA is bad business, most particularly since at the end of the day, it doesn't generate as much. But I digress. It says it was for that reason that Griner has traveled to Russia to play during the WNBA offseason for the past 7 years, where, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that word, pays the athlete more than $1 million per season. So at the end of the day, that's how much she's making, or has been making in regard to this, right? Another article came out. This is dated October 30th, right? TheSpun.com. And the title, of course, is Sports World Heartbroken Over Brittney Griner's Decision. Now, I'm not going to read through this whole thing. Basically, the decision they're referring to is that, she didn't want to play basketball in prison. Now, let me clarify something about my position. I don't think that somebody should spend 9 years in jail. That's their laws. If you're going to go to another country, you need to be cognizant of that. That is what it is. And I'm saying that because of how many black men have to have that attitude in the country that they live in. Most particularly since now we're seeing 25, 30-year-old millionaires setting up marijuana shops all over the goddamn country, while there are brothers that are still locked up around nonviolent marijuana-related possession and sales crimes, and they're still sitting in prisons over something that young people are making millions on. This was something I was reflecting on the last, a few years ago, because I have some, chronic pain, and I was trying to experiment with different types of, treatments for it. So I'm trying out, and I was driving all over California. Like every month I'd go to a different one, no matter where it was in the state, just to kind of get a sense of what the cannabis industry in California looked like. And overwhelmingly, man, these shops that I went into, these high-end shops with high-end merchandise and security features. I mean, you couldn't even walk in without some type of security that was vastly different from shop to shop, right? This stuff was not cheap. You know what I mean? And I'm walking into all of these places. They're invariably owned by fairly young white folk, right? But at the end of the day, man, I started thinking about how many brothers are locked up behind weed charges and essentially locked out of the cannabis industry, right? That's one of the things that got me about that. So, no, I don't want to see anybody go to jail for that. But so just to say, this article is really just dealing with the fact that she didn't want to play basketball while she was in there. She doesn't want to play. It's too painful. Understandable. That said, I don't want her to spend that time in there. It's sad that anybody does. But the reason I wanted to deal with this is because of this right here. And it's a kind of a throwaway, little post from NBC News. Few people might not think much about. I just had a very short observation regarding that. Um, you know, and it's, I just want to get through it real quick. I'm not going to be here, all night, but this was just something on my mind I wanted to get out. Says Brittney Griner will enter a system of isolation, grueling labor, and psychological torment when she is transferred to a penal colony, the successor to the infamous Russian Gulag, to fulfill a 9-year sentence, former prisoners and advocates say. Again, a quote from NBC News. I'm curious, how different is that from Black men being overwhelmingly hyper incarcerated for at least the last 50 years behind similar things? Now, I'm not saying not to give a damn about Brittney Griner. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, in terms of how this message is coming across, this attempt to generate empathy because she's going into prison. And I don't have any problem with her being, receiving empathy. I don't. What I have a problem with is this is the same shit that Black men have been dealing with daily and still are. They're hyper incarcerated more than any other group behind the same crimes every group commits. See, we get this idea that because you're arrested, you somehow commit crimes more than anybody else. And then we have this kind of self-righteous idea that you need to be punished because you committed the crime. But people don't want to fixate on the idea and the notion, which is backed by research, that much of the time, what Black men, and most particularly, are incarcerated for is the same crimes other people commit, but they don't go to prison to the same extent. We have been targeted to be thrown away. We are disposable. Now, we talk about men being disposable in general, but few groups can talk about being disposable institutionally, most particularly in the country they reside in, the country they built. Right? The majority of those enslaved and brought in initially until the early 1800s were Black men. They brought in women in larger numbers later when they wanted to bolster their enslaved populations. They fixated on Black men. And this is the same group that predominates prison numbers. So when we talk about this moment, now this is very reminiscent of what I call flat blackness. Those who've been longtime listeners of the show know when I talk about flat blackness, basically what I talk about are the ways in which Black men's numbers, when it comes to anything, it could be anything. It could be health related. It could be in regard to incarceration. It could be in regard to police brutality, vigilante homicide, whatever the issue is that attracts attention. Black men's numbers are useful when it comes to gaining attention for other groups, even other demographics in the Black community, such as Black women. Right? When our numbers are used and subsumed into others' numbers to attract attention, but Black men themselves don't get talked about. That's what I generally refer to as flat blackness. This is a little different. This is almost an inverse of that, where they're hyper focusing on what Brittney Griner is going to experience in prison, while ignoring the fact that this is actually daily reality for too many Black men. Generally speaking, 1 out of 10 are Black men are incarcerated at a time, physically incarcerated. 1 out of 3 will be incarcerated in their lifetimes, right? So what they're talking about in terms of fixating on what she's going to experience is something that more than too many Black men already do. And nobody seems to give a shit. That's the interesting thing about this, right? If they focus on something that was so particular to Russia that it was out of our frame of reference, I could understand that. But this kind of generic sentence just highlighted exactly what Black men overwhelmingly experience. And it's in the attempt to generate empathy, while at the same time, I don't really think Black men do have empathy as far as what they receive from the mainstream, even within the Black community around this issue. I don't think they do. But let's look at a couple of other numbers I thought would be important. Right? I'm going to jump into a few things here just to kind of give it some context so you can see what we're looking at. Shout out to W. Let me handle some of these super chats real quick. He says, it's multiple brothers serving life right now for less than an eighth of bud under 3 strike laws. Absolutely. Appreciate that support. Let me go back up and see if I can catch some more I saw pop in. Shout out to Shocks 112. He says, "Are you going to start?" Oh, okay. That was one. That's the last one I covered. All right. Yeah, but that's what we're dealing with. So as you can see here, NBC News, you got a quote here: Black people are 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of murder than whites, according to the National Registry of Exonerations. We're going to delve into that in a minute, because I think we've gotten real comfortable, some of us, with this idea that if you get arrested, that's just somehow, a jury ruling about your guilt. I mean, we treat that like that's the end of the equation. I think that's highly problematic. The assumptions we make around things like that. Here's another from deathpenaltyinfo.org. Of the 75 innocent death row defendants who spent 30 years or longer in prison before being exonerated, 67% are Black. The racial pattern is similar for all murder exonerees, regardless of sentence, the report notes. Right? So let's go through a few more things just to kind of nail home this whole idea. Right? So we got this for here. This is where I pulled that quote from, deathpenaltyinfo.org. And again, I will put all of these in the description box so you guys can check them out at your leisure. But I thought it important to look at some of these numbers because we get so comfortable with this idea of, who's guilty, who's innocent, so on and so forth. And just because you're arrested or if you're incarcerated, that's it. You're guilty. It's the end of the conversation. It's not that easy. And it never has been when it comes to Black men. We're just a disposable population. And I don't say that out of self-pity. I don't say that as an attempt to highlight Black men as just, empty victims that have no souls. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm talking about this because we have a way of dehumanizing Black men when we think about them, and we humanize others when they endure things that Black men have had to endure for generations. We need to actually humanize Black men, even in the way we talk about Black men. We need to humanize them. And that needs to be a framework in how we deal with it, how we not only see each other and talk to each other, but how we even advocate for what kind of politics we want to see. It has to start with first acknowledging that we're fucking human beings. That's the first part. So, as I said in the quote that I kind of I read it, so I'll skip past that. It says the already disproportionate risk of wrongful conviction the registry found was even worse if the murder victim in a case was white. The report, Race and Wrongful Convictions in the United States, 2022, reviewed the cases of 3,200 innocent defendants exonerated in the United States since 1989. Black people, the researchers found, were 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted, were more likely to be the targets of police misconduct, and more likely to be imprisoned longer before being exonerated. Black people were overrepresented in every category of the 1,167 wrongful murder convictions in the registry's database. African Americans constituted 56%, 74 out of 134 of all death sentenced exonerees, 55%, that's 294 out of 535 of wrongful murder convictions, resulting in life imprisonment, and 54%, 270 out of 497 of wrongful murder convictions in which exonerees were sentenced to imprisonment for terms of years. Innocent Black people are about 7.5 times more likely to be convicted of murder than innocent white people, the registry reported. That figure, the report noted, applies equally to those who are sentenced to death and those who are not. Now, let me say something again about flat blackness. Let me say something again. People are starting to have a very fearful approach to talking about the gender dynamics and breakdowns of incarceration. Notice in this whole paragraph, it's going into the numbers. This overly used word of Black people, right? Black people, over and over again. Black people, Black people. Now, when I came out of grad school, I had heard all kinds of numbers about rates and, ideas about, Black people and incarceration. And I took it as I was trained to. Until I tripped up and actually saw a report that does something that a lot of reports don't want to do, most particularly at different periods of time. But a lot of reports didn't want to actually focus on raw numbers. When they focused on raw numbers, around the time I really started to study incarceration and Black men most particularly, at the time, it was about 60,000 Black women incarcerated across the country and over 800,000 Black men in the same population, 13% of the country. So when you have these paragraphs on reports like this that keep saying black people, black people, black people, that's what I mean by flat blackness. Now, the inverse of flat blackness is what we saw in the article with Brittney Griner, where you have this attempt to generate empathy and highlight that she's about to experience something that far too many black men experience. But flat blackness is being represented right here in this deathpenaltyinfo.org study, where they don't disaggregate the data by gender. They will by race, but not by gender. You want to look for reports almost on any subject relating to that's of interest to black men. You want to find it disaggregated by race and gender, and you'll find it's not always easy to find. A lot of them are broken down by race, and that's it. Right? But sometimes we actually know the numbers around race and gender, and you still see these kind of reports generated that flatten this out to suggest subtly that black men and women are dealing with these issues to the same degree. Now, 40 years ago, this kind of conversation wasn't needed. But when you actually started to see gender being used to generate policy and resources toward specific gender and racial groups, you see this disposability of black men, even at the academic level. And too many black male scholars have observed it, but not known how to respond. I'm going to tell you how to respond. Call the shit out. It's flat blackness. They're using the numbers to conveniently convey an idea about the realities of black life that ignore the particularities of black male life to help contribute to the idea that this is a racial issue. But when you do break it down by gender, which we saw in the Brittney Griner report or article, you can generate empathy for women. Oh my God. She went to jail for 9 years around weed, and she's going to be uncomfortable in a Russian prison. And I do have empathy for her. I have empathy for everybody who's had to endure long periods of stretches of incarceration around nonviolent crimes, particularly around weed, an industry that's generating millions for other folk. But you're not going to do it on the backs of incarcerated black men and have me stand by and act like it's not happening. Not happening. So let me see. Now, the rest of this, I think I'm going to go through in the visual. So this is something you can kind of peep through yourself. Here's another where they're getting some of this data from. So this is the National Registry of Exonerations, Race and Wrongful Convictions report. Shout out to Shocks for the support. He says, based on research ethics, they have to present raw numbers and specifics about methodology. If not, you can challenge the publication to be retracted. Nice. Nice. KMK, appreciate that support. Thanks for that. All right. Yeah. So here we go. Let me see. Michael Skipwith, welcome to the diamond level membership. Appreciate that. So looking at this, I thought there was some information. There's some useful information here. But again, beware. You're going to run across more flat blackness. This whole report, for the most part, you're just going to see African Americans, right? African Americans, 13% of the U.S. population, 47% of the known exonerations. Let me see. Okay, didn't give the year on this. All right. And again, I'm going to put this link for this PDF for you to download as well. But I thought we'd go through some of it. So we know according to this, African Americans are 47% of the exonerations. I've heard higher numbers, but we'll go with that for the moment. It doesn't say what date this was generated, right? It says black people are 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of murder than whites. African Americans in prison for murder are more likely to be innocent if they are convicted of killing white victims, right? African Americans imprisoned for murder are more likely to be innocent if they were convicted of killing white victims. Interesting. Murders with white victims, 15%. African American murder convictions overall, right? Okay, so I see what they're saying. So basically, if you kill another black person, nobody gives a damn, but they'll investigate the case more thoroughly if you've killed a white victim. Wrongful African American murder exonerees, right? 31% wrongfully convicted of murdering a white person, right? So the subtext being they actually investigated the case. Okay. Murder exonerations with white defendants underneath that. They kind of see the color breakdown where it's including policeman misconduct without police misconduct, right? So if there's a murder exoneration with a white defendant, There's a certain amount of police misconduct. If it's a black defendant, there's more police misconduct. Interesting. On average, black murder exonerees spend 3 years longer in prison before release than white exonerees, right? I can show you recent reports of people that have spent 30, 40 years in jail, just getting out, finding out that the evidence that was available when they were first put in is what's actually used to exonerate them. But much of the time, just like in the film with Brian Banks, they had to find a liberal white lawyer that actually gave a damn and was willing to go above and beyond to present evidence in a more forceful manner that was already available, right? So there's a lot of people that have been going to jail simply because they could be sent. That was it. In terms of sexual assault, black prisoners serving time for sexual assault is 3.5 times more likely to be innocent than a white sexual assault convict. Major cause is misidentification of black defendants by white victims. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Put you in a lineup. The niggas all look the same, right? How many innocent men have gone to prison for years behind being accused, right? Behind a reverse mirror. Somebody said they look like somebody else. In half of all sexual assault exonerations where mistaken identification is a factor, the defendant was black and the victim was white. There we go again. Sexual assault exonerations where mistaken identification is a factor, right? I've seen cases. There was a case just a few years ago where a man was sent to prison for a sexual assault that a woman dreamed happened to her. I bullshit you not. She dreamed it. And this dude went to jail behind a damn dream. But we just gonna dismiss black men that are incarcerated because they committed the crime, they deserve to do the time, right? But if we're finding out that the exonerations overwhelmingly suggest that black men are innocent more than other groups, most particularly when they bother to investigate, which they usually only do around white victims or defendants, then you kind of figure out that there's something else going on here. But, that would actually require seeing black men as human beings, which is a problem, I argue, even within the black community. We've seen so much, kind of this bombarding of media ideas that we've accepted for so long. We believe the shit. We believe it. Even when the data shows how innocent we are, doesn't matter, right? A combination of only occurs in about 11% of all sexual assaults in the U.S., right? So all sexual assaults in the U.S., black defendant, white victim, you see the numbers there. African-American sexual assault exonerees spent 4.5 years longer in prison than white sexual assault exonerees. There we go. So 4.5 years, time away from family, especially if they're arbitrarily locked up behind someone else's imagination. So you just doing things, you going through your day. You're arbitrarily put into a lineup and locked up for something you didn't do. And nobody wants to hear it. Because as far as they're concerned, you're guilty because you were arrested. And that's black folk too. It's ridiculous. Last line, last column, drug cases. Innocent African Americans are 12 times more likely to be convicted of drug possession than innocent white people. In Harris County, Texas, 133 defendants pled guilty to drug possession, but lab tests later showed they had no illegal drugs. We saw the same kind of thing happen with stop and frisk, particularly in places like New York. I think it was it might have been less than 3 or 6% of people actually had arrestable issues going on when they were arbitrarily stopped and frisked. But as long as they were black men, we didn't care, right? Society didn't care. So anyway, 62% of black exonerees under Harris County drug crime guilty plea exonerations, right? And yet, out of the entire Harris County population, black residents constituted 20%. Since 1989, more than 1,800 defendants have been cleared in group exonerations that followed 15 large-scale police scandals in which officers systematically framed innocent defendants. The great majority were African-American defendants who were framed for drug crimes that never occurred. Now, this is interesting because this means that, I've already laid out my attitude about people arbitrarily being incarcerated behind nonviolent weed-related crimes. But this means that you're talking about people who spent years in prison behind police scandals. In essence, they did less than Brittney Griner. And yet I don't see any articles asking that people empathize with them, and they're innocent. They're exonerated. Do you know how hard it is for a black man to get exonerated? Shout Shout out to Stephen Dunn. He says Antonio Moore's article about how there are more ADOS men incarcerated in America than all female prisoners in the world shook me. My older brother and I are the only males from our neighborhood who aren't dead or incarcerated. God damn. God damn. I hear you, Stephen. Yeah. I've used Moore's chart on many a presentation. Powerful. More black men incarcerated in the United States than all women around the entire world. Google Antonio Moore and incarceration and look at that chart. Powerful. Right? This is what we're dealing with. So overall, all I wanted to point out tonight is that even though I have no problem with people empathizing, with Brittney Griner, pointing out the the issues she's dealing with, how it's going down. No problem with that. None at all. That's not my point. My point is not that she's getting focus or empathy. My point is this shit happens every day. And to the people it happens to most in the very same community that Griner comes out of, nobody gives a damn. They didn't say anything extraordinary that's taking place with her in Russia that ain't happening right here. But we haven't necessarily learned how to humanize black men in our own minds, let alone in our own communities. Clutch and Stick says, source Tim Wise, whites stopped only 20% as much as blacks, 80% more likely than blacks to have contraband or warrants during said police stop. Okay, so I'll read it one more time. Whites stopped only 20% as much as blacks, but 80% more likely than blacks to have contraband or warrants during said police stop. Tim Wise. And I've reviewed some of Tim Wise's work. He's pretty tight on his numbers. Yeah. It says Dardar says, yeah, it's very obvious that we're targeted and we're just 6% of the population. Indeed. So anyway, just wanted to get that out. Like I told you, I wouldn't be here all night, but I do appreciate the support. Like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. If anything, I do need to thank a couple of you who shouted out very early on, to help people remember that the Onyx network is up. You can find it you can download the app on the iPhone, Android, kind of app stores. You can also check it on Amazon Fire TV and Roku. Check it out live 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365, baby. And shout out to BGS Idmore, Green Gorilla. Those brothers have allowed me to play some of their content on the channel. So I've been doing that. I played content from others' channels who invited me to their shows. So, shout out to Shay Charday, shout out to Obsidian, shout out to O'Shea Duke Jackson. They gave me permission to use the shows that I visited, on their platforms to show on the channel, so on and so forth. But still trying to expand, still trying to develop where it can go, but support the channel nonetheless. You can go to Patreon and support the Onyx Report here on YouTube, the Institute for Black Male Studies. And if you're curious about that, you can go to instituteforblackmalestudies.com. There are classes there, or there is a class you can take. There are a number of interviews that are there for free. And that also speaks to the Institute for Black Male Studies page here on YouTube, where I recently posted an interview with Irami Osei Frimpong. So you can check that out if you haven't seen it. Very interesting, entertaining, and insightful interview, I think, even if I, say that about an interview I conducted, but go check the brother out in there. And then, of course, you can support the Onyx Network all through Patreon. You can support one or all three just by becoming a monthly patron. So consider doing that. Appreciate the support. Y'all have a good night. I'll highlight y'all soon. Make sure I didn't miss anything else there. Anyway, yeah. So appreciate the brothers in the chat. Y'all have a good one. Peace.